Hari Om, Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. It's always a pleasure to come to Chinmay Vibhuti, and it's always a pleasure to talk to the Chinmaya Sadhakas. I consider it my great honor that I am here to talk with you today. I'm going to talk to you about temples, and as she introduced, about the sculptural aspects of temples as well as the philosophical aspect of it. Now this is a self-selected audience, but I am still going to ask you a few leading questions, though I am pretty sure that the answers to all questions are going to be yes from your side. How many of you have gone to a temple in the last 7 days? Yeah, so all of you will say yes, but normally when I ask this question to a general group of people, there is only about 30-40% of the hands going up. But okay, whichever temple that you went to do darshan, of course, yes. But how many of you looked at the vastu itself from all angles? Okay, a few hands, alright. So what did you see when you saw the vastu? Can any of you answer? Yeah. Okay, but what are the parts? Are there any parts of the temple that stand out in your mind? Yeah? Yeah, yes. Garbhagriha is where the deity is, that is where you stand outside and you take darshan. But when you enter the temple, there are usually steps to climb up, right? Once you climb up, then there is a big mandapa where you enter first, and then you walk towards the Garbhagriha, then you take darshan, take prasad, and then you do a pradakshina, which is either pradakshina of the whole praharam, or it's a pradakshina inside the temple, outside the Garbhagriha, depending upon how the temple is built. So these are essentially the various parts of a temple. But let me go back to my presentation. So again, self-selected audience, so you will all know the answer to this question, but this is a murti of which deity? Sri Narsimha, yes. Now there is a reason why I start my presentation with this murti. This is a murti, this is a Hoysala era murti. It is at the temple of Hoysaleshwara in Halebeedu in Karnataka. It's a magnificent murti, it's almost 6 feet tall and it's at the height of the first floor. So this is a view that you get from the ground floor, and you see that it is a Vidarana Narsimha. He has Hiranyakashipu on his lap and he is breaking open his stomach. He is doing Vidarana of the Narsimha, and you can see Garuda on one side and you can see Prahlada and Prahlada's mother you can see on the left side. Can you? They are folding hands and standing there. Now the reason why I showed you this was I was in Halebeedu and I was staying at, there is a Karnataka tourism place in Halebeedu right opposite the temple. So I was staying there because early morning the crowds don't come. Most of the people stay in Hassan and they come to this temple. But if you want to see the temple early in the morning when there are no crowds, then it's best to stay there. So I had stayed in that little place, and early morning I had gone to see the temple, and I had seen it twice, thrice before in the 2 days that I was there. Once again I did a round and I was just sitting next to this particular sculpture and I was admiring it. Just then the first bus came and a lot of tourists came jabbering, and there was a couple, a newly married couple. They had this Punjabi couple with that's how I knew they were newly married, because she had that Chola. And they were looking, they didn't have a guide, so they were looking at the murtis and they stopped in front of this murti and I could hear them talking amongst themselves. So the wife was asking the husband, "Ye kiski murti hai?" And the husband looked at it and said, "Pata nahi, shayad mujhe to lagta hai ki Hanuman ji ki hogi." And that is when I realized, and these were not your atheist Hindus or ultra secular liberal Hindus or whatever. They had gone to the temple, they had done the pujas, they were wearing tilak, they had taken flowers and everything. They were believing Hindus like most people you meet. But still, they did not know that this murti was of Sri Narsimha, because they just saw the face and they thought that this murti was of Hanuman. So I couldn't stop myself and I told them, no, this is not Hanuman, this is Narasimha, and I explained to them that he is Vidarana Narasimha, he is Raudra Narasimha, there is a fierce aspect of Narasimha, and you can see Prahalada there, you can see Garuda there and all. And they were like stunned, and then they asked me, can you show us around, can you explain the other sculptures? So I took them around and I explained all the other sculptures, and these were stories that we have all grown up with, okay. So there is a sculpture of Krishna lifting up Govardhan Parvat, there is a sculpture of Shiva doing Gajasura Vada, Shiva doing Andhakasura Vada. These are all stories that most of us have grown up with or should have grown up with. At least in my generation, there were grandparents who would tell us these stories. So we were familiar with these stories. But these were youngsters who go to the temple, who celebrate all the festivals, who call themselves practicing Hindus, but they had no context, no cultural context of what the stories were all about, what the sculptures were all about, and why the temples were built, and what is the whole purpose behind a Hindu temple. So that's when I realized that there is a huge lacuna here which exists, where people don't know. They go to a temple, yes, they do darshan, but they do not know the true essence of a temple, or what it is meant for, or why it is meant for. Now, when we go to darshan, it's a very interesting word. What does darshan mean? Darshan means that which I see, right? But when we also talk about our philosophy, it is also what we have Shada Darshanas. So even the philosophical aspect, even the scriptures, even the philosophy, there is nothing to see there in that sense. In a temple, yes, there is a murti there, you stand in front of the murti, you see the murti has a prana, so the murti also sees you, so there you can understand that there is a word called darshana. But why is our philosophy called darshana? Because there is a deeper meaning, there is always a deeper symbolic meaning. It is not just you standing in front of a stone vigraha, that is not just the only darshan. It is the kind of feelings that vigraha brings alive in you, the kind of feeling of oneness that you feel, that is the essence of darshana, and that is the same essence that is there in the philosophical darshanas also. So now we trace the known history of temple architecture. Why do I say known history? Because I am only going by what we have found in archaeological excavations. This does not mean that temples were not there before this. Because if we go back to the Sindhu Saraswati civilization, which at this point, and it could go back because the research is ongoing, it's at least 8,500 to 10,000 years old at the most conservative estimate, right? And the kind of artifacts that we have found there, so this is the seal of Shiva. He is sitting there in Padmasana. His hands are on his knees, he is meditating, and there are animals all around him, right? And even his face, you can see that his eyes are closed, his drishti is on his nasagra, he is in deep meditation. So this proves that Lord Shiva worship, the worship of Shiva Murti, the worship of Shiva is Dakshinamurti actually, because he is sitting in meditation, he is the first guru, existed even in times of the Sindhu Saraswati civilization. So it figures that we have only found seals, we have unfortunately not found murtis yet, but this could be because the murtis were made of wood back at that point of time and they did not survive. But we have evidence here that these seals were considered to be sacred, and that is why they survived, and you can very clearly see that yoga existed, meditation existed. There is a seal that shows yogasana poses, full Surya Namaskara poses, so that shows that people practiced yoga abhyas even then. There are Matrika Murtis, there are Mother Goddess Murtis, Devi Murtis, that tells us that the concept of Shakti worship also existed in this time. So it is logical that since there were Murtis, there were seals like this, that there were alayas or structures housing these Murtis. Logical, right? So these alayas are what? Again, devalayas, the houses of God. So temples must have existed, but right now when we go to Sindhu Saraswati civilization sites, we only see the brick platform. We do not see anything above that. So people are hesitant to say, even archaeologists are hesitant to say, that this base was a temple once. But if you think about it logically, and you know that if worship existed, if meditation existed, if dhyana existed, if Shiva existed, if Shakti existed, then obviously there must have been temples also. Maybe those temples were made out of wood, maybe they were made out of mud, maybe they were made out of mud and covered with hay, and that is probably why they did not survive. It is logical. So now we know all this. You all must have studied in 5th grade, 6th grade civics and history that the features of the cities during the Sindhu Saraswati civilization, and never call it Indus Valley civilization by the way, because it is not an Indus Valley civilization. The civilization actually existed in a huge area that started from one bank of the Sindhu and in northeast India back then, and it existed all the way to the Saraswati, and so today's Haryana, Punjab, all of that belt, all the way up till Gujarat, there are sites of this civilization, and one of the biggest sites is Rakhigadi in Haryana, which is bigger than Mohenjo-daro and Harappa combined. But we only hear of Mohenjo-daro and Harappa because those were the earliest site to be excavated by the British. So that is why they called it Indus Valley civilization, and they also came up with this very convenient theory of Aryan invasion because it suited them. They said, their logic was, if we say that the Aryans came from outside, colonized the local people here and imposed their way of worship on the local people, then that gives us legitimacy also, no? If you say that 5,000 years ago, somebody from outside came, enslaved you all, and you accepted it, so 5,000 years later, we are also white people, we have also come from the same direction. So how can you say no to us? So in order to justify their colonization, in order to justify their slavery, they came up with this patently false theory called the Aryan invasion theory, and they completely arbitrarily assigned a date to it. And Max Muller admits it in his work that when he talks about, when he translated the Vedas, he put a number to it, that the Vedas must have been written in this year. There was no proof. He just came up with, it's what you call it a POMA fact, pulled out of my A. So literally, he just picked up a date and said that this is when the Vedas were written. And because he was the first Western guy to translate the Vedas into a Western language, his narrative stuck, and that is what people, and the British wanted us to learn only this history. So they came up with this big lie called the Aryan invasion theory. Anyway, that's not the topic of my talk today, but that's besides the point. So we know that from whatever architectural remains, archaeological remains that we have found in Sindhu Saraswati civilization sites, we knew that they knew how to do the burnt brick architecture. They had a very good drainage system, underground drainage system. They had intersecting roads and they had planned cities. In Mohenjo-daro there is a great bath. We know now that a full chariot has been found in Sanauli, where it is a chariot that's made out of bronze. There were terracotta seals with Pashupati, there were Matra Devata Murtis, as I said. There is no surviving structure that can be called a temple, but I am adding a caveat here, that does not mean that there were no temples at this point of time. All we can say is that those temples were probably made out of perishable materials, and that is why they did not survive. Next please. So now we come to the earliest known archaeological evidence of a place of worship. This is a cave that is in a place called Barabar. It's in Bihar. So if you go from Patna to Gaya by road, you will see this big mountain range onto your left, and you will see this cave there. This belonged to actually a pantha, a monk, order of monks known as Ajivikas. They used to live there and they used to meditate basically. So this dates back to probably 300-400 years before BCE, meaning more than 2300 years ago. Now if you can see that this cave is carved out of solid granite. Inside it is fully polished floor with amazing acoustics. If you chant an Om there, the reverberations just go on and on and on for about 5 minutes. It's really amazing to sit in that cave and meditate. The acoustics is so good. So, but what is more interesting is, can you see that arch on top of it? Nowadays we call it a Chaitya arch because it is mostly seen in the Chaitya Grahas. But what is interesting is, this is carved out of stone, and do you see those jambs coming out below the arch? They are stone jambs. Do they serve any structural purpose to the structure? Do they add, do they give support? No, they don't. They are made out of stone, right? But what does this imitate? It imitates a wooden architecture. If you build a wooden hut and if you build a roof with 2 wooden beams, they need horizontal support because otherwise it would not survive. So that is why you have these horizontal beams with the jambs coming out. Even today if you see a wooden hut anywhere outside the village, you will see that the roof is supported by horizontal beams and the jambs jut out. Now when these people carved this cave, their idea of human beings always go from known to unknown. So they knew wooden architecture, they knew certain aspects of wooden architecture. So even though there is absolutely no structural purpose to those jambs, they spent a lot of time, and granite is a very, very hard rock to carve, but they took out a lot of time to carve out those jambs even though they serve absolutely zero purpose, because they were recreating the earlier existing wooden architecture. Which again lends credence to my earlier statement that there must have been temples before this, only thing they must have been built by wood, and that is probably why they do not survive, because obviously they recreated this from an earlier known wooden structure which was also meant as a house of God, a Devalaya. Next please, sorry, I am only doing it. So now we come to the features of this era of architecture. So we come up with monolithic pillars, that is pillars made from the bottom to top out of one single rock. Finely carved capitals, bull capital and Sarnath capital. Now we come to, this architecture sort of melts into Mauryan architecture, and that is when you start seeing the capitals with huge pillars, like our national symbol, the bull capital, is from this era. Stupas start getting built. In stupas, the surface is built with bricks. Then the Buddhist architecture we start seeing from this era, earliest era. So Buddhist architecture is of 2 types. A monastic complex will have viharas, which are rooms for the monks to stay, and there is a huge chaitya, which is like a prayer hall, and that has like this, you must have all seen the cylindrical solid structure made from bricks and mud, and on top of it there is a stupika, which is like a stone casket. I will show you a picture in a little bit, and in that stone casket there are usually relics kept, either of the Buddha himself or of some high monk in that particular order, and the rough period is about 322 BCE to about 200 BCE. So can you see that stupa, and can you see that little box on top of it? That is called a stupika, and in that actually it is opened, and in that, in a ivory box, in a small ivory box, they used to keep the relics of the Buddha, either a Buddha's tooth or his hair or a little piece from his clothing or some relics of a monk. So that is considered to be the most sacred focal point of the stupa. And this is when, in the Shunga Shatavahana era, following the Mauryan era, this thing of Makaratorana started appearing, which is at the gateway of the stupa, there are 2 pillars and there is a column, there is a toran, and this toran is profusely carved. Now if you go to Sanchi, this is a famous Sanchi stupa in Madhya Pradesh near Bhopal. If you see the carvings in that, and there will be a close shot in a little while, you will see that the faces are like 2 inches, 2 inch by 2 inch, but you can see expressions on those faces. So there is a scene where the Buddha is leaving his palace and he is basically giving up everything, and all the people of Kapilavastu have come to see him off, and they are all dismayed, they are all sad, and you can see those people are like, they are looking from the balconies, their faces are 2 inch by 2 inch, this much. But if you look carefully with the binoculars on those faces, you can see that sadness, you can see that surprise, you can see that awe. That kind of mastery the sculptors had, that is because this was carved by goldsmiths from the area. And the goldsmiths were used to carving like very, very minute details on gold, right? But gold is very malleable, it's very easy to carve on gold, but it is not easy to carve on granite. But they still had so much of control over the medium, and their spiritual practice, their sadhana was so strong. You cannot do this, you cannot do it as a sculptor today. If he just comes and says that I am going to carve out this face, you are not going to do that. There has to be a spiritual sadhana that you have to do to prepare you for it, and only then you can create something so sublime. So the features of this is the early classical Buddhist architecture. You can see the carved railing and gateways, and examples of this are Sanchi Stupa. There is Pandavleni caves near Nashik. The Bharuch Stupa was in Bihar. Now that entire stupa is in the National Museum in Calcutta. So Alexander Cunningham, who was the first director of ASI, he found it and he just carted the whole thing, put it on a train and took it to Calcutta, because at that point of time Calcutta was the capital of British India, and he put it in the museum. I am just grateful that he didn't put it on a ship and took it to England. They have taken a lot of other stuff, but at least this remained in India. So this is the Toran in the museum in Calcutta. And you can see that the photo is not clear, but in one of the circular panels there is a beautiful Gajalakshmi, which is a very typical depiction of Lakshmi with 2 elephants on both sides, and the Devi is sitting on a lotus and they are pouring water on her. So this is a Buddhist stupa, but there is Gajalakshmi in there, and even in the faces of those devotees there, you can see a couple there. The man is standing with folded hands, and the woman is standing like a Shila Balika under a tree, and their posture, their clothing, their jewelry, it will all give you a sense of what the fashion was of that time. And you will see that many of these designs are actually still being made. That I find very, very remarkable. So these are the Satvahana caves from Nasik. Again, this is cave architecture where they just scoop things out from inside out. It is not built architecture. It is not built by stone on stone on stone and built temple. That comes a little later. These are all natural rocks that are scooped from inside out, and an enclosure is created to be a place of worship. So now we come to the Kushana era next. This is when the Buddha starts appearing in human form. So before this, in Sanchi, in the Satvahana caves, you do not see the Buddha depicted in the Murti form. He is depicted in what is known as an aniconic form. What does aniconic form mean? Meaning they considered him to be so pure and so sacred that no sculptor could do justice to his form. So that is why they represented Buddha with some symbols like an empty throne, like empty footwear, or a peepal tree, or some leaves fallen on the ground. But the murtis of Buddha started appearing at this time, and they had a lot of Greek influence. If you can see classical Greek sculpture, even if you Google it, you will see that the curls in the hair, the high forehead, the face, and the drapery, most importantly, with a lot of folds, that comes from the Greek influence, because the Greek clothing, it's called chiton, it's always full of little tiny folds. So as I said, Buddha was first depicted in a human form, and this is where we call it the Gandhara school of architecture, and extravagant folds in drapery. So the famous Buddhas of Bamyan, they belong to this era, this kind of sculpture. Now unfortunately they are not there because the Taliban blasted them, but if you remember the picture, you will see that there were like huge folds, beautiful folds in their clothing. And the way they did it was very interesting. What they did was they put huge ropes, like 100 feet, 200 feet tall ropes, and on those ropes they first tightened those ropes and they built like mud folds around those ropes, and then they dried it. And that is how they created those very, very beautiful folds. It's a work of art itself. So now we come to the time where we start seeing the remains of what we today know as a Hindu temple, that is in the Gupta era, because this is when people have started built brick architecture, and which is survived. So the temples are built like with stone base and bricks, and that is how it is built. This is also the time we start seeing that the temples are built on a raised platform. Now why is this raised platform is there? Because it is a material representation of a philosophical concept. It is not built just to look good. There is some thought behind it. So what is the thought behind it? Why is a temple on a raised platform? Why do we have to climb a few steps to reach the temple? Can anybody answer me? There are no wrong answers. You can make a wild guess. Pardon me? Yeah, but why? Why do we walk higher and higher? What is the thought behind it? You are on the right track. It is because God is above us. Sacred is always above the mundane. We live in a material world. God, Bhagwan, Ishvara, lives in a higher spiritual plane. So we have to make ourselves elevated to have the darshan of the Lord. So that is why when we climb these steps, and there are always a specific number of steps, they are usually odd numbers, and it is symbolically thought that as you climb the steps, you are leaving behind all negativity, you are leaving behind the petty shadripus like Mada, Matsara, Lobha, all of that, and as you climb every step, you are supposed to remind yourself that I am now going to have darshan of God, so that is why I need to make myself pure. That is also the reason why every single Hindu temple will have a water source next to it. If either it will be a Pushkarini, or it will be a river, or it will be a well. That is because first you need to take a bath. That is your first step in ritual purification, in telling yourself that you are making yourself pure, you are making your body pure by taking a bath. Now as you climb these steps, you are making your mind pure by getting rid of all the negative vasanas or the negative shadripus that you experience in your normal everyday life. So now we can see in this temple that base is known as Adhisthana. Okay? So Adhisthana or Jagati, in Marathi that word Jagati has corrupted into Zote. If there is anybody from Maharashtra, you will know, we say Gharache Zote. Zote means Jagati actually, meaning the base of the house. So here you can see that this temple is built by stone, and there is a niche there. Can you see it? And in the niche there is a sculpture. Now that niche is known as Devakoshta. The term in Indian architecture for that niche is Devakoshta, and in that Devakoshta there is a murti which is usually an aspect of the main murti in the Garbhagriha, usually, but there can be other gods and goddesses also. So like if this is likely to be a Vishnu temple, so there is that is the Ananta Shayana sculpture that you see. So even when you see the temple from outside, you will be able to get a fair idea about who is the deity that is installed in the Garbhagriha. That is why symbolically these Devakoshtas are kept. So the main features of the Gupta age, we all know that it was a golden age of India. Literature thrived, music thrived, dance thrived, sculpture thrived. It was a very prosperous kingdom, and they also did rock cut caves and also the built up temples. 320 CE, 550 CE is roughly the time period. So this is their example of rock cut caves. This is Udaygiri caves. This is again quite near Sanchi. And if you see, this is a beautiful Vigraha of who? Which Avatara? Varaha Avatara. It's huge. I don't have a picture of me standing behind it, but in front of it, then you would get a perspective. But I come to his lesser than his knees. And he is standing, Sri Vishnu is standing in what is known as the Alida Mudra, where his foot is like this, one foot is raised. Now that body language tells you that he is alert, he is assertive, and his body language shows command. Like he has already rescued Bhudevi. Can you see how petite she is? The Murti is huge, it is supposed to fill you with awe, and the Devi is very delicate, and he has already rescued the Bhudevi from Hiranyaksha, who is Hiranyakashipu's brother, and he has put her on his shoulder, and he is still in the sea. So that is why there are Nagadevatas, and they are praying to him, and they are telling him that please don't hurt us, we surrender. And there are Rishis there. Can you see on the wall behind? Rishis and gods, they are singing the praises of Varaha Avatara. And see how beautiful the Vaijayanti has been carved. And all this has been carved of the same stone, okay? And in the Vaijayanti, this photograph is not that good, but if you see it in real life, you will see that in the Vaijayanti, you can make out individual flowers. Again, this is not easy to do in granite. It's a very unforgiving medium. One mistake you make, it is there. You cannot erase it. You cannot go Control Alt backspace, unfortunately. So these are also the murtis at Udaygiri. This is on the extreme right is one of the first depictions of Devi as Mahishasura-Mardini. And as you can see that she is using the Trishul, yes, but she is also stepping on the Mahisha because she is Mahishasura-Mardini. She kills him by pressing him under her toe. So that is why that Mahishasura-Mardini aspect is very clearly seen there. Again see her body language, again see the power in the way she is standing. Of course in later days it starts becoming more and more refined, more and more fine, and you start getting fine features. You also see Sri Vishnu, and on the extreme left is Agni actually with the face of a ram. Now we move to Ajanta frescoes, which start around 200 BCE. Now unfortunately I have to cover a span of 8,000 years, so I have to jump from point to point, okay. So now we come to Ajanta caves. Ajanta caves, we all know that they are famous for their paintings, right, the frescoes, wall frescoes. Now again this is carved out of granite. And you can see that the Chaitya window that you had seen earlier in the Barabar caves now has become more ornate, but those jams are still there. Earlier they were very simple, but now they have learned to go deeper. They have gotten control over technique and they have understood the rock better probably. The workmanship has become more evolved. Technology has evolved, and that is why they can now do a deeper arch, deeper Chaitya window arch. Now we come to just behind the Sanchi Stupa that I showed earlier, there is this temple. This is a built up temple, and here now what you see is the Garbhagriha, which is behind, which is covered, and now you can see that there is a very small Ardha Mandapa outside, which is supported by pillars. Now how did this become? See, Devalaya by definition means the house of God, but now the population has started increasing. People have started going to temples to worship as a communal activity. So they need a place outside the Garbhagriha. Otherwise, if the Garbhagriha is very small, then only one person can stand there. Now a family comes or a group of people come. Where are they going to stand? Where are they going to sit? So to accommodate them, they start building something called as a Sabha Mandapa, which is the basic embryonic Sabha Mandapa that you see here. It's very small. And this is type of temple you see in Pune everywhere, you see under a tree, you see anywhere, you will find this kind of temple still. You know, there's just a basic structure, just a room where the murti of God is kept, and there is a little bit of a mandapa or a ovary where people come, they sing bhajans, they do puja, they gather together. So, some kind of communal activity. Now, as time progressed, technology progressed, kingdoms became richer, the kings had more money, the people had more money, people started worshipping in the temples in large numbers, the need for bigger and bigger structures started evolving, and that is why the size of mandapas became bigger, the ceilings became higher, and in fully developed temples like in Khajuraho, you will see 2, 3, 4 mandapas one after another, which you will see in a bit. So this is a temple in UP known as the Bhumra temple, a Gupta era temple. Again high platform, Garbhagriha, but there is no mandapa here. Now we start seeing the Shikhara, that is the superstructure on top of the Garbhagriha. This is built out of bricks. This is again Bhitargaon, this is in UP, and the Devakoshtas now become more and more, and because you are building a superstructure, you don't want a flat wall, you want curves, you want angles so that the light can play very beautifully in those angles. So you start doing folds in the temple. That also increases the surface area of the temple, right? Instead of building a flat wall, you build it like this, like this, like this. So you are basically increasing the width of the temple so that more people can come in, more people can worship. That also give you more space to do Devakoshtas. So if the murti is of Vishnu, then you can do Devakoshta murtis of all his 10 avatars, all his 10 aspects, and you can tell the whole story of what Sri Vishnu is all about or what Krishna is all about in the Devakoshtas itself. So the idea is, by this time when you go to a temple, you first take a bath, you purify yourself physically, then you climb up the stairs, you remind yourself that you are purifying yourself mentally to have the darshan of God, then you climb the platform and then you do a Bahir Pradakshina first. So you go around the temple, you see all these sculptures, you understand, you remind yourself of the stories, and remember, this is at a time where not many people knew how to read. Not many people knew how to, there were no TV to beam Ramayana or Mahabharata in your living room. So you needed to be told that story. So this is a visual representation of the story, and people would come in large groups, they would look at the sculptures, and the children would ask their parents or grandparents, what is this? And they would tell them, this is a sculpture of Lord Krishna and whatever, and that is how they would know the story, that is how Dharma would get perpetrated, Dharma would get more popular. So here you can see how beautifully they have used bricks to form those arcs, and below they have made those Devakoshtas, and there are murtis there. So this is a temple that's dedicated to Vishnu, and here you see Krishna doing Chanura Mardana. He is doing wrestling and he is killing the demon Chanura. So like that in this temple, the entire Krishna Leela is depicted in different sculptures. Of course, this too was destroyed by the Islamic invaders, that is why you cannot see the face and you cannot see the murti in all its glory. So now we come to, by this time, by the 4th, 5th century, the temple architecture has evolved that there is a full vocabulary of temple building. It has certain parts, it has a Pushkarini, it has a Pradakshina Path, it has a Sabha Mandap, it has a Garbhagriha, it has a Shikhara. All these parts have become evolved by this time. So where are the temples built? So if somebody decides to build a temple, do they just see some open space and say, okay, this looks like a nice place, let me build a temple? Or is there some criteria to it? What do you think? There has to be a criteria to it. So what is the criteria? One is the place needs to have abundant supply of fresh water. So riverside sites, sites where the river takes a moon-like turn, which is why the Bhima river is known as Chandrabhaga in Pandharpur, because it takes a half moon turn, and in that place is the temple of who? Yes, Kashi. The Ganga takes a moon-like turn, and in that turn, in that place is the temple of Kashi Vishveshwara. So, and a temple is built at a kshetra, which is a holy place. Holy place, why? Because it is a place where siddhas and rishis have meditated over the years before the temple has been built, and they have increased the spiritual power of that kshetra. That kshetra itself is sacred. Anything in that kshetra is sacred. So if you go to Kashi, the whole of Kashi is sacred, not just the temple, because it is a kshetra. If you go to Vrindavan, the whole of Vrindavan is sacred. If you go to Pandharpur, the whole of Pandharpur is sacred. Yes, the temple is the most sacred focal point, but the Panchakroshi is also sacred, because that is a place where a lot of sages and rishis and siddhas have meditated before, and they have increased the spiritual quotient of that place. In the kshetra, there is a tirtha, which is a holy place. By definition, it means a place where you can cross over. And the temple is the material structure that is helping you cross over. Now, cross over from where to where? From your normal mundane life, from your normal profane life to the profound, from your normal life to the sacred. And that is why if you see the Jains, their gurus, what are they called? Tirthankars. Why? Because their job is to help you cross over that fort, to make that transition easier from our normal mortal life into the sacred life, into the divine life. So, a temple is built at a tirtha, and even then at the tirtha, there is a river, okay, ideal condition, there is a river that is in the moon shape, and there is a huge place. So, even in that place, the temples are built at a particular place, not in the entire place. So, how do you select that place? There are certain rituals and rules that are still followed even today. There are traditional sthapatis who follow this tradition. So, when they select a place, they have their own methods of testing the soil, they have their own methods of testing the prana of the soil. They will dig a hole and they will pour some water in it, and they will count in how much time the water gets absorbed. If the water remains in that hole, that means that place is really, really good. Then they will plant some sacred seed with mantras at that place, and they will watch whether the seed grows or not. The seed has to grow in a particular time up to a particular level. Then they know that the prana of this place, this particular spot is very, very good, and that is the place where the Brahmastan of the temple is selected. Brahmastan is where the actual deity is established, and we have all seen this process in the Rama Janmabhoomi temple when it happened. When the first Bhumi Pujan happened, that is what they did. They chose the Brahmastana and they planted this holy grain there, and when it grew, then that is exactly where Ramlalla's Murti was established. And if this, so many sthapatis, there are many sthapati schools. In Odisha there is a thriving stapati school, in Tamil Nadu there is a thriving stapati school, in Gujarat Sompuras who built the Ram temple, there is a thriving stapati school. So they still follow traditional ways and means of finding and selecting the place. Now when you go to a temple, as I said, you do the circumambulation. The circumambulation, you see the temple from all sides, you see, you understand the murtis, you understand the stories that they are trying to tell you. Then you go inside. When you go inside, actually you don't directly go to the Garbhagriha. You climb the steps, you enter the Sabha Mandap, and now the Sabha Mandapas are largely empty, but back then the Sabha Mandapas were all full of some activity or the other. There is a circular stone in the middle of the Sabha Mandapa that is known as a Rangashila, which is where dance performance used to take place, which is where music used to be played for the Lord, which is where pravachanas used to be held, which is where the kathavachaks used to sit and give discourses, which is where learned sannyasis used to come and give discourses, and people would sit all around and they would listen to these discourses. So again, you have taken a bath, you have purified your body, you have climbed the steps, you have started to purify your mind. Now you sit in the Sabha Mandapa and you take part in all those activities and you increase your spiritual tapas before going to the Garbhagriha. You fill all your senses with something that is holy. You hear good things, you see good things, you prepare yourself. These are all stages of preparations as you go towards the Garbhagriha. Then when you've done watching the discourses or the dance performances or whatever, now it's time for you to do the actual darshan. Now when you go towards the Garbhagriha, your mind is still full of sounds, your mind is still full of images, your mind is still full of the words, and that is not acceptable. Because unless you are empty, how will you accept the grace of the darshan? So you have purified yourself to a level, but you still have to take a moment, you still have to step back, meditate a little bit, take a few deep breaths, chant Om if possible, and you need to empty yourself of all the images, of all the sounds that you have heard in the Sabha Mandapa, and there is a space for that, which is literally space. It's called Antarala. Antarala means space. Now there is a small vestibule between the Garbhagriha and the Sabha Mandapa. It's very tiny, maybe 3 feet by 4 feet, but the purpose of that space called Antarala, which is really space, is for you to step back, for you to empty yourself of all the images that you have accumulated, and now and only now are you capable or considered to be patra for taking darshan of the deity. So once you have paused at the Antarala, then you go towards a Garbhagriha. Now when you go towards a Garbhagriha, there will always be a high threshold, and only inside is the Lord established, the Murti established, and on that door, on that Dwarashakha, there are several carvings, profusely carved Dwarashakhas. Usually after the Gupta era, they started putting carvings of Ganga and Yamuna on both sides of the Dwarashakha. Now why Ganga and Yamuna? Remember, everything in the Hindu temple is symbolic. Nothing is created just for the heck of it, or if somebody thought, oh, it's a good idea, I feel like putting Ganga there. No, there has to be some thought behind it. So why Ganga and Yamuna? Ganga is a symbol of purity, because once you take a bath in the Ganga, you basically burn off all your bad karma, all your sins, and Yamuna is a symbol for bhakti, because Yamuna was the river where Krishna basically spent his entire life on the banks of. So even if you have some amount of impurity still left in you, symbolically, the minute you see Ganga and Yamuna, it gives you the feeling of having had a bath first, and secondly, it is to remind you that, look, you are now taking darshan. You have to take darshan with a pure mind, that is what the Ganga is telling you, and you need to have bhakti in your mind. Only then you will get the full benefit of darshan that the Yamuna is telling you. Then you are standing in front of the Garbhagriha, and you will see that in these temples by about 5th, 6th century, the exterior of the temple is profusely decorated. It is full of murtis, small, big, there are different layers, and you will see it a little bit in little bit ahead in this presentation. But as you go inside, the number of murtis start reducing. So exterior is profoundly and profusely decorated. The Sabha Mandapa is somewhat less decorated. Once you go into the Garbhagriha, after the Dwarashakha, the Garbhagriha has just bare walls. There is nothing, there is no other murti. There is only one murti, which is the murti that is the Adhishtatri Devata of that temple. That Vigraha is there, and that Vigraha is always kept dimly lit. Now of course in all the temples you put all bright electric lights and all that, but if you go to temples in Kerala, if you go to temples in Tamil Nadu, you will see that in the Garbhagrihas, the deity is very dimly lit with only oil lamps. Again there is a reason for it, because it is supposed to tell you, remind you that light, that dim light is the light of your Atman inside you. That is why the deity is dimly lit, and when you stand in front of the deity, that is when you look at the deity and you are studying Vedanta. What is the basic principle of Vedanta? That we are all part of the big Brahman, right? So that is the essence ultimately, that when you are standing in front of the deity, you are supposed to be reminded that you are also part of that whole. You are the Jiva, the deity is the Shiva, and when you are taking the darshan, it is the Milan of Jiva and Shiva. It is basically, the temple is making you realize that Tattvam. Exactly. This is the spiritual philosophical purpose, but there is also a community purpose, which is a little more mundane. Community purpose, because the temple was and still is, if you go to the villages, you will see that all social and economic activities usually happen around the temple. There will be a school in the vicinity of the temple. There will be a big tree in the vicinity of the temple. All the old people will meet in the evening and meet at the vicinity of the temple. The women will meet and chat and form friendships in the vicinity of the temple. The children will come and play under the tree in the temple premises. So the entire socio-economic life of the village, even today in India, revolves around the temple. Back then, of course, temples were universities, temples were marketplaces, temples were schools, temples were a place where any hungry person could go for food, temples were places where people could go in times of drought. There were temples that had hospitals where people would be treated free of cost. There are inscriptions in Chola temples which say that the temple had animals, and because they had animals, they had veterinary hospitals, they had vets on their payroll, they had their lands, they had their granaries. So everything, every aspect of your normal life also was controlled by temples. Controlled as in it was voluntary, it was not like a fatwa was given, said that the temple will control all aspects of your life. It was that people would voluntarily give the temple, and the temple would use those resources to help the community in need. Like even today, if you go to villages in Tamil Nadu has about 1,000-year-old temples, 900 and something, they are still surviving. It has one of the oldest temples in this country because it was saved comparatively from the destruction by the Islamic invaders, because there was a lot of resistance there. But today also, if you go to see in places, you will see that temple Pushkarini is built in such a way that all the water channels in the village, rainwater channels, they empty in the temple Pushkarini. So it is like a natural rainwater conservation. So the temple tank never goes dry, no matter if it doesn't rain for 1 year, 2 years, 3 years or whatever. So when the people's wells get dry, the temple Pushkarini will have water, and everybody will come to the temple Pushkarini to get their drinking water, to get their bathing water. The temples will have granaries, so in times of drought, the temple would open their coffers. Even now, from Karnataka onwards, you will see free Annadanam in almost every temple. Nobody goes hungry. If you feel hungry, you can go to any temple, anybody is welcome, regardless of what is your caste, gender, religion, doesn't matter. That is the Annadanam that people in the temples in South still do, which was a custom which was universal. Of course, the North, a lot of these customs have lapsed, possibly because there was a huge brutal cut because of the tortures and because of the destruction caused by Islamic invaders. So now we come to the evolution of temple architecture in the form of a cosmic Purusha. Now this is a Dravida temple, this is a sketch where the temple is conceived as a physical representation of the Virata Purusha's body. So his feet are the Gopura entrance, the Dvajasambha is his private parts, and his face and where his eyes are there, that is where the Brahmasthana is, that is where the deity is. So when we worship, when you go to the temple, again, now we just go in front of the deity, we stand in front of the deity, we usually have a very selfish demand, ki, okay, my son has his exam tomorrow, let him get good marks, my daughter has a visa interview, let her get the US visa, or some petty things like that. But that was not the point of the darshan. The darshan was to be taken for the sake of the darshan, to make you realize that Tattvamasi. So when you go there, you use all your senses, you use all your jnanendriyas to get darshan. That is why there are specific rituals. You ring the temple bell, you activate your hearing sense, you light the lamp, you offer flowers and dhoop, you activate your nasal sense, you drink tirth and take prasad, you activate your taste sense, you take the heat of the aarti, that is the fire sense. So with all your senses, with all your jnanendriyas, with all your karmendriyas, you worship God and you stand in front of God, and that is when you get the realization that hello, I am also a part of this. So there are 4 types of muktis. This is my guru in this field, Dr. Deglurkar. He has this very interesting concept that the 4 types of muktis, that are Salokata, Samipata, Sarupata and Sayujjata. So when you go to the temple, it is supposed to make you realize that. How? When you enter the temple premises, you have in a way entered the realm of the Lord. That is Salokata. Then you enter the temple, you get closer to God, that is Samipata. Then when you stand in front of the God and you see Him standing and you see your reflection in Him or His reflection in you, that is Sarupata. And finally when you realize that you and the Lord are part of the same Virat Brahman, that is Sayujjata. That is the feeling of oneness. So now we come to, again, from the spiritual to the mundane, the basic features of temple architecture. So there are roughly of the Garbhagriha, there are 2 big parts of a temple. One is Vimana and the Mandapa. Vimana is the Garbhagriha plus Shikhara. The whole thing is known as Vimana. The upper part is known as Shikhara, lower part is known as Garbhagriha. Shikhara is the tall tapering portion of the temple. It is supposed to represent Mount Meru, that is the abode of gods. Then there is a Pradakshina Patha, the enclosed corridor, either outside the Garbhagriha or outside the temple. The devotees walk around in 18 clockwise direction. Mandapa is the pillared hall in front of the Garbhagriha, also known as Nritya Mandapa, Ranga Mandapa, Sabha Mandapa, depending on the purpose for which it is used. And then because as people started spilling and as the people who built temples had more money and had more political power, they started getting more ambitious and expanding the temple architecture. So in front of the main mandapa, there started being subsidiary mandapas like Ardha Mandapa, Mukha Mandapa, and you will see it in the Khajuraho temple. Then Antarala, as I said, it literally means space. Then the Pitha or Adhisthana, which is the basic platform. Toranas, that is the Makara Torana. If you go back to the Sanchi Stupa, those Makara Toranas are there in Hindu temples also, particularly in certain types of architecture like the Gurjara Pratihara or the Odisha architecture. Amalaka, that is the difference between the Dravida Shikhara and the Nagara Shikhara, that is the North Indian style of temples, which I will come to in a minute, and the South Indian style of temple building. So Amalaka is that circular ridged big circular stone that is on top of the Shikhara that looks like a amla, gooseberry, that is why it is called Amalaka. So this is the Nagara temple, this is the Odisha temple actually. You can see that the Shikhara is tall. So your eyesight actually in a Nagara temple, it goes vertical, your line of vision. So when you see the temple, your eyes start from the Shikhara and they come down gradually. Whereas in a Dravida temple, your line of vision is horizontal. You start from the Gopura and your eyesight goes horizontally and you see the Shikhara and the stupi on top of it. So this is a Nagara style which is primarily found in North India. The second one is the Dravida style, that is a Gopura, and the third one is what is known as a Vesara style, which is seen in central India, which has aspects of the North Indian style as well as the central Indian style, as well as the South Indian style. So here you can clearly see that the northern style, there are mandapas which are gradually reducing in height, and the Shikhara is very tall, it is capped by an Amalaka. And whereas in the South Indian style, it is more horizontal and the Shikhara is more broad based, you know, it is more wider than taller. So this is the Khajuraho temple. This is a great example of a perfectly developed, fully developed Nagara style temple. And as you can see that the main Shikhara is also made of tiny replicas of itself. Can you see? So it is like those tiny shikharas are known as urushringas, and each urushringa is an exact image of the main shikhara. So it is like there are billions of cells in your body. They are different cells with different purposes. But each cell is as uniquely you as the whole of you, right? It's the same concept. So each shikhara is the exact representation. It's as much the shikhara as the whole effect, the cascading effect of the shikhara that you see. And you can see that the mandapas are getting gradually smaller. Now there is a proportion to it. So the first mandapa is about half the size of half the height of the shikhara. The second mandapa is about half the size of the first mandapa. Then like that it keeps reducing, so that you get the balance, you get that amazing visual line when you look at it. Your eyesight moves very beautifully, very gradually from the shortest mandapa all the way to the Garbhagriha and back. So now we come to, I am not going to take the Nagara style of architecture much after this, because that is very vast and that also includes the Odishan style of architecture, and I do not have that much of time. So now I am going to focus on the Dravida style of architecture and tell you about the regional variations. So Dravida style of architecture, it's roughly identified by the different kingdoms or different dynasties that built temples. So the Chalukyan architecture, where were the Chalukyas from? Which state today? Karnataka. Where were the Pallavas from? Okay. Where were the Cholas from? Where were the Hoysalas from? Okay, who said Cholas from Karnataka? Karnataka also, you are not wrong, because at that point of time there were parts of Karnataka that were part of the Chola territory. Then Vijayanagara was Karnataka. So this is the typical Vimana of a South Indian temple, where there are actually floors, like first floor, second floor, third floor, fourth floor, and on top of it there is a big dome like stone known as the stupi, that is the big huge stone. So Chalukyan temples are seen in the capital cities in Aihole, Badami and Pattadakal in today's Karnataka. They actually had a thriving school of architecture, so they experimented a lot. So that is why you will see Dravida style temples also there, Nagara style temples also there, and Vesara style, which is a combination of the temples there. Aihole and Pattadakalu have temples that reflect the changing styles in architecture. Later Chalukyan temples are more influenced by Pallavas, because remember, Chalukyas and Pallavas had this intergenerational rivalry going on. So they were like for 200-300 years, the kingdom of Kanchi, which was the capital of Pallavas, and Badami, Vatapi, which was the capital of the Chalukyas, they kept fighting with each other. Sometimes they won, sometimes Pallavas won. But it's like if the father of Chalukya dynasty was defeated by a king in the Pallava dynasty, the son from the Chalukya dynasty would continue that fight and would win that fight. So that happened quite a bit. And because of that, you must have all heard of the song Vatapi Ganapati Bhajayam. Now that Vatapi Ganapati temple is actually in Tamil Nadu. Why? Because the Ganesha originally was in Vatapi, but when the Pallava king won a victory over the Chalukyas, they didn't destroy, they didn't humiliate the people that they won over. What they said was, your most sacred Vigraha that we will take in our kingdom, we will build an even bigger temple than you have built, and we will worship him as our God, and that is our way of telling you that you have been defeated in this temple. Destroying temples, taking people as slaves, killing them was not our style. That was never the Hindu style. So that Vatapi Ganapati is actually in Tamil Nadu. Badami was known as Vatapi. It was the capital of early Chalukyas. It has beautiful sandstone caves cut into cliffs and huge beautiful bas relief. Bas relief means they carve out parts of a temple wall so that the sculpture stands out. Kannada inscription dates the caves to 6th century CE. It's a UNESCO World Heritage Site. You can see this is how it looks. This beautiful red stone that looks amazing in the setting sun. Now this is one of my favorite sculptures in all of this world. It is Lord Shiva doing Ananda Tandava, and you can see Parvati there, you can see baby Ganesha there standing, you can see Nandi, and you can see that his hands, see, can you see his one hand is coming out from behind the other hand on the right side? Now that is not easy to carve on stone. To show that kind of depth, to show something is coming out from behind and to show that grace, and see how he is standing like this, see the arch of the foot. It's a small thing, but it requires an amazing sense of aesthetics, it requires an amazing level of sadhana to first be able to think of something and then to execute it. Even today, the traditional sculptors, before they sculpt a murti, they chant the name of the god that they are supposed to carve for days on end. Earlier it used to be months, now it is days. Even Arun Yogiraj did it, the guy who carved Ram Lalla. And then they just stare at the Shila for a long time. Do nothing, just sit in front and stare at that block of the rock till the sculptor starts to see the murti of the god in the Shila. When that manifestation fully happens, when they see the god in that Shila, that is the time then he takes the hammer and the chisel, not before that. It is not like he will just take a block and say, okay, now I'll carve. No, he has to elevate himself through his sadhana, through his chanting, through fasting. They have to be celibate, they have to stay away from their family. There are a lot of things that are to be followed, lot of do's and don'ts, lot of acharas to be followed before they start carving out a murti, even today. This is another majestic sculpture. Who is he? Trivikrama. Vamana, who is turned into Trivikrama basically. So you can see that he is huge, he is towering over everybody, and you can see there Bali and his wife in the corner, and the guy who is standing next to Bali, the guy who is holding his hand, can you see between Bali's wife and Bali? Bali is the one who has that vessel of water, because he is going to give dan, and Trivikrama has asked for 3 steps of land, and with one land, you know the story, with one step he covers the earth, with another step he covers the sky, and then Bali says, where do you want to keep the third one? No, Trivikrama asks, where should I keep the third step? Then Bali says, on my head, and then he keeps it on head and he goes to Patala. We know that story. Now he has asked for the boon here at this point in story, and Bali is all ready to give. So his guru Shukracharya, he knows that he is Vishnu, he knows that he has come to trick him somehow. So he is actually holding his hand back and he is telling him, don't do it. And then you know the story that Bali doesn't listen because his reputation is at stake. So he said, no, I have once committed, I will give Danam. So then Shukracharya, the story is that the Shukracharya makes himself small and goes inside that vessel and he blocks that water spout so that the water doesn't fall. And then Vamana knows it, so he takes a small blade of grass and he puts it in that and he blinds Shukracharya. That is why in Marathi we have a saying called Zharitle Shukracharya, meaning there are, for government schemes, the government schemes don't, it is an actual saying. When the government schemes do not benefit the people, they are supposed to benefit because somewhere someone is blocking the flow of funds. Those people are called Zharitre Shukracharya. So this is how it looks, majestic. If you all haven't been, please do. It's a very, very beautiful place. Now we come to Pattadakkalu, which has a complex of 7th and 8th century CE temples. The name comes from Pattada Kisuvolada, meaning red soil valley for coronation. This used to be the coronation valley for the Chalukyas for many years, many centuries actually. These temples reflect the fusion of 2 major architectural style, which is the Rekha Nagara Prasada, which is the North Indian Nagara style temple, and the South Indian Dravida Vimana style. The 4 temples are in Dravida style, 4 are in Nagara style, and Papanatha temple is a combination of the 2. You can clearly see it here. The first one is the Nagara style, the center one is the Dravida style, and the rightmost one is the combination of both. And here you can very clearly see the difference in one picture. of different styles of temple architecture. This is the Dravida style, this is the Nagara style, and this is the mixture. Now we come to Aihole. Aihole emerged by 6th century as a cradle of experimentation with temple architecture. There are 16 different types of freestanding temples in Aihole because it was built as a laboratory where sculptors guild and the builders guild, Sthapatis guilds would come together, and it was a lab. They would talk amongst each other, they would exchange thoughts, and they would experiment different kind of temples, and if those experiments became successful, then they would replicate it, then they would do this R&D and take it to actual temple building sites. So here you can see now that they are trying to build a 2-story temple. So there are 2 Garbhagrahas here. One is on top and one is in the main first floor. Now these kind of temples you still see in Tamil Nadu. There are temples of Sri Vishnu where there are 3 levels actually. On one level he is sleeping as Vananta Shayana, on one level he is standing, and one level he is sitting. There are many temples like that. There is one in Sri Villiputtur. The temple is like that. So you can see now they are experimenting in the grills, right? If you see in the leftmost picture, the Vatayana, that is the window, those grills are also carved out of stone only. But even here the creativity is so much that every grill is different. It didn't need to be. You could have had the same, like all of these grills are same only, no? You don't see that this window has different grills, that window has different grills. Now we have moved towards uniformity. Those people are bored by uniformity. They needed something creative, they needed something different. So all the sculptors, all the Sthapatis, they give vent to their creativity, and one said I am going to build this grill like this, second said no, I want to make something different, third one said I want to make something different, and that is how you see so much of diversity. Then those circular ones, the wheel-like windows. Again, that is another beautiful way of making a window. And there are Devakoshtas in that first floor Gabara also, first floor Garbhagriha also. This is the first temple with the Gajak Prishthakar plan, which is like the ovoid. At the back it is circular and it is full of pillars. So based on this, the Yogini temples, which are fully circular in North India, were built. And based on that was our Parliament House. You can see that this is the original inspiration of it. This is the Durga temple in Aihole. Now we come to the Rashtrakuta architecture. Rashtrakutas were a dynasty which was in today's Maharashtra, but they were also, their kingdom incorporated parts of Karnataka, and they won over the Pallavas as well in Kanchi. So they built something amazing. You probably have all been to Ajanta and Ellora. In Ellora there are many caves, 32 caves, out of which there is one cave which is simply out of the world, which is cave number 17, which is known as the Kailasha temple. It was started by this king called King Krishna II. The temple is inspired by the Pallava temple of Kailashnatha and the Chalukya temple of Virupaksha and Pattadakkalu. It is designed to represent Mount Kailash, the abode of Bhagwan Shiv. It is the world's oldest and biggest single rock-carved multi-story temple complex. There is nothing like this in the whole world. And I have travelled in 25 countries and I have not seen anything that even holds a candle to the beauty and to the sublimeness of this temple. If you ask me, it is very difficult for me to choose one temple that, you know, I can call my favorite or whatever. They are all houses of God. But this Kailash temple has a very, very special place in my heart. So this is the plan, and this entire thing, this was one hill. So this hill has been scooped out, and this entire 3-story temple has been created top down. So there is a very beautiful story about it. So there is a temple in Kanchi which is also dedicated to Shiva. It is called Kailash temple in Kanchi. So there apparently the King Krishna, this is a legend but I like it because it is a very sweet legend. So this King Krishna, he won over the Pallava kingdom and he was called to Kanchi for a state visit. So he and his wife went to Kanchi, and his wife saw that Kailashnathar Kovil in Kanchipuram and she really liked it. And she told her husband that I want a temple like this in our kingdom. So apparently he said yes, but he really didn't mean to keep the promise. So as men very often do, they say yes to anything their wives say just to get them off their back, but they don't necessarily want to do it. So he comes back and then he forgets all about it. So his wife gets really mad, and then once she gives him an ultimatum and she says that if I do not see the shikara of this temple in 10 days, I am going to fast to death. Now in 10 days how can you build a temple, right? So the king is now in a panic and he knows that his wife will do what she says. So then he announces in his kingdom and in the surrounding kingdoms that this is the condition of my wife, if anybody can fulfill it, they can, I will patronize them and give them a contract of this temple. So apparently this one Sthapati comes forward and he says, yes, in 10 days I can complete the shikara of the temple. So the king says, okay, how will you do it? So that is when he starts from top down. So he does that shikara in 10 days, the queen gets to see the shikara, her condition is fulfilled and she doesn't go on a fast, and that's how they say that the temple was built. I am not saying this story is true, but it's a beautiful story. So this is how it looks. And you can see that this is a fully developed Dravida style temple. It's got everything in it. It's got a Pradakshina Path, it's got Devakoshtas, it's got a Garbhagriha, it's got Antarala, it's got a Stupi, it's got the Shikhara, everything. The only difference is it is carved inside out and top down, which is not easy to do. And it is carved out of volcanic basalt, it's not even granite. Granite doesn't chip easily. This rock gets chipped easily, but which is why you have to be very careful with the force of your strokes, because slight pressure here and there and it could go completely wrong. But the people, our sculptors, our mineralogists had so much of information about the basic quality of the rock that they knew exactly how much pressure and how much effort to apply to carve different kinds of rocks. So this is how it looks. Can you imagine this? All of this is carved out of one rock, even the Jayastambha, even the victory pillar. There is a life-sized murti of elephants there that is also carved out. So it's like, imagine this, close your eyes and imagine like you have a soap, a bar of soap in your hands, and you are carving that soap and you are scooping things out of this soap, and finally what remains is this temple. It's not as easy as carving a soap, but that's the closest analogy I can give you. So this is how it looks. And at the base of this temple, and you will see this particular feature in a lot of other temples also, there are rows of elephants. Can anybody tell me what is the symbolic meaning behind it? Why elephants? Yeah? Yes, it tells you that the kingdom is so strong, it is strong like an elephant, and elephants are also a pratika, a symbol of Aishwarya. So the kingdom is rich and strong, that is why those elephants are carved to hold the weight of the temple on its back. So now we come to Pallava. Oh, another thing I want to tell you, this temple must have taken fully to complete at least 80 to 100 years. Including the galleries on the sides. Now 80 to 100 years, it is not possible for a single sculptor or even a group of sculptors to work. There has to be at least 3 generations of sculptors, right? And there are over 1 lakh different individual sculptures in this temple, in this entire temple complex. But not one will feel out of the way. For 80 years to complete a temple of this size, there would have been at least 300 to 400 people working night and day. 300 to 400 different people. You get 10 workmen today to put tiles in a room of this size. Will you find all tiles done the same way? There will be somebody who will do it wrong, there will be somebody who will raise the level a little slightly or whatever. You will be able to find out the difference. But these number of sculptors, they created a masterpiece like that over generations, but today you cannot make out what was made before, what was made after, this is better, this is not good, you cannot make out. So how did this uniformity happen? They did not have machines at that point of time. Though people will try to tell you that aliens came and made this temple and all that. But I think it's greatly insulting our own ancestors to give the credit of something so sublime, saying that they could not do it, that's why aliens came and did it. No, it was not aliens, it was our people who did it, who had that kind of technology. And not only did they have that kind of technology, they had that power of collective sadhana that they could execute a project like this without any individual distinctions. It's very seamless if you go and see this temple. Now we come to Pallava architecture. They ruled from Kanchipuram. So they also specialize in monolithic rock cut architecture. The 5 Ratha temples in Mahabalipuram are one of the earliest examples of monolithic, as the Shore temple of Mahabalipuram and the Kailashnath temple of Kanchipuram. So this is the Kailashnath Kovil, and if you see the Kailasha temple that I showed you earlier, you will see that there are distinct similarities, right? This is the Shore temple. These are the famous 5 Rathas. This was also once one complete hillock which was scooped out, and there were 5 temples created. Now here also there are experimentations. So one of them is that Gajaprishtakar. They are known as now 5 Pandava Rathas. One of them is like a Dravid temple, and if you see the leftmost temple, it actually looks like a thatched hut, does it not? Again, remember what I told you about the Barabar caves, that they tried to go from the known to unknown. So they were familiar with these local huts, and even now you will see the thatched huts in rural Tamil Nadu. So they replicated the thatched hut in stone and they made this beautiful temple. Now we come to Chola architecture, which was the age of refinement in Dravidian art. There are 4 great Chola temples which actually form a UNESCO heritage site, which is the great temple, the Brihadishwara temple of Tanjavur, the Brigadishwara temple of Tanjavur, the Brihadishwara temple of Gangaikonda Cholapuram, the Airavateshwara temple of Darasuram, and the Kampahareshwara temple of Tribhuvanam. All of these 4 temples, they form a World Heritage Site. Now Brihadishwara temple of Tanjavur was completed around 1009 CE. It's a masterpiece of Dravida architecture. It was built by Raja Chola. The shikhar is crowned by a single block of granite. The stupi is said to be weighing 81 tons. And the shikhara itself is 13 stories high. And it's stupendous, the kind of engineering that has gone into this. So for a while, nobody could figure out how they took that 81-ton stone. They had no cranes then. Then they realized that they had built a spiral ramp with mud. And they kept on building, and the ramp got higher and higher for elephants to take the stone up. And there are temples, there is a temple called Bhojpur in near Bhopal, where you can see the remnants of that ramp even today. So that is how you can make out that they made the ramps like that. So this is how the temple looks. It's magnificent. This is the Airavateshwar temple, and you can see this little man standing there in the right corner praying. This is the scale of the temple. And this temple, interestingly, the Sabha Mandapa of this temple is actually built like a chariot. So there are wheels. So later on you will see the famous Garuda Ratha of Hampi, no? So this is built years before that, and this is the same concept. This is the Brihadishwara temple of Gangaikonda Cholapuram, which was built by Raja Chola's son, Rajendra Chola, who was, if possible, even greater king than his father. He expanded his kingdom outside of India. He was a great man. He built this temple which is very similar to the built temple that his father built, but such was his humility that he kept the height of this temple 15 feet smaller than his father's temple, as a mark of respect to his father. He could have built a taller temple also, but he chose not to. But this is very similar to the temple in Tanjavur. Now we come to my favorite style of architecture, which is the Hoysala architecture. This is a subset of the Dravida style known as the Karnata Dravida, where the temples, the Adhisthana now becomes star shaped. It has got corners. The platform is not rectangular or square, it has got angles to it. There are intricate carvings done on the stone here used is called chloritic schist, which is colloquially known as soapstone, because when it is mined, it is very soft and it is very easy to carve very intricate details on it. And as it ages, as it is exposed to the elements, as it is exposed to sunlight and rain, it starts becoming harder. The Ramlalla Murti is done in Holsara style in soapstone by Arun Yogiraj, who belongs to this tradition. So temples in and around Kaveri basin, there are about, they built about, in their 350 years of rule, they built about 1000 temples, out of which probably about 200 temples remain now. They are mostly, you can visit many of them if you base in Hassan, and most famous temples are Belur, Halebeedu, Somnathpura and Belwadi, and they developed a style of temples which can go from Ekakuta temple to Panchakuta temple, meaning Ekakuta temple is one Garbhagriha, one Shikhara and one Sabhamantapa. The Dvikuta temple is a temple which has a common Sabhamantapa, but two Garbhagrihas, one on either side. Trikuta is there are 3 Garbhagrihas, 3 Shikharas and 1 common Sabhamantapa, accordingly for Chatushkuta and Panchakuta. So this is a Trikuta temple. Can you see? One Garbhagriha, one Shikhara, the other Garbhagriha, other Shikhara, and there is one straight ahead. This is the temple of Chennakeshava in Somnathpura near Mysore. Again, a stunning temple. If you ever get a chance to go to Mysore, please visit this temple. Every inch of this temple is like a jewel. So this is Shiva doing Gajasur Vad, and you can see in this every inch of that slab is carved. There is nothing, there is no free space, and he is doing a Tandava inside the elephant skin. Can you see it? Because the demon was in the shape of elephant. So he is standing on his head and he is dancing inside it, and there are musicians there, his jewelry, his body position, there is a little bit of, you can see a Nandi's face in the extreme left. It's incredibly beautiful. There is another one sculpture. This is in Halebeedu I think, but in Belur there is another sculpture of the same scene, Gajasur Vada, which I don't have a good picture unfortunately, but if you go there, please ask the guide to show it to you. There Shiva is holding that Gajacharma on his head like that, and his nail of this finger is actually has pierced the Gajacharma and is coming out on top, and you can see the wrinkles where the leather has, you know, basically burst open, and his nail is poking out of that. To be able to think of something like this and to execute it in stone, I don't know what kind of spiritual tapas those people must have had. So this is Vishnu and Lakshmi Narayana, and you can see again those beautiful accordion like folds and how beautifully those murtis have been carved, and everything, there is not even an inch left that is uncarved. Oh, this is another favorite structure. So this is Nritya Ganesh. Ganesha is dancing on the mouse, and can you see the base of this? Can you see a little bend where his claws are like flayed? Now that is actually a flaw in the rock. The rock was uneven, the slab was uneven, so it had that dip in it. Now the sculptor wanted to use it, but how to use that dip? So you need to have some kind of visual clue. So what he did was, see, Ganesha is dancing on the mouse. Ganesha is Tundila Tanu, so the mouse cannot bear his weight. So the mouse is playing his feet and he is holding on, he is pushing against the rock, and that is why the rock has also got a dip in it, and exactly at that point the claws have been shown. Again, I cannot imagine how anybody could have thought of this and done this. Now this also brings me to a very important aspect of all Indian art, and this is not just specific to temple architecture. See, our art is very diverse and very individualistic. So if you are making a Ganesha and I am making a Ganesha and he is carving a Ganesha, there are certain things that we need to follow. So he has to have a Tundilatanu, he has to have a mouse, he has to have a Pashankush, he has to have a broken teeth, he has to have an elephant's face, yes. But how you do it after that, it is up to your creativity, it is up to your creativity, it is up to my creativity. So the same school of architects, the same school of sculptors working on the same medium, but your Ganesha will look different, your Ganesha will look different, my Ganesha will look different. But to anyone seeing those three murtis, it will be obvious to you that it is a Ganesha carved in Hoysala style. So there is conformity, yes, but there is a lot of creativity, there is a lot of creative freedom to diverge and then come back, to diverge and then come back. If you listen to Indian classical music, you will see the exact same principles. So if one person is singing Rag Darbari and the other person is singing that exact cheese in Rag Darbari, they will sound completely different because they are moving away from the notations and coming back on the sum. They are moving away from the notations and coming back from the sum. It's the same thing that is there in paintings, it is the same thing that's there in dance, it's the same thing that's there in sculpture, it's the same thing that's there in literature. That is why you have so many versions of Ramayana, but they all follow the same basic story. But there are embellishments here and there. This is another beautiful temple. It is a Hoysala temple of Veeranarayana in a place called Belwadi in Chikmagalur district. Again, a very beautiful temple. And what is amazing about this temple is that because this temple is a little far away, it was spared the destruction by Islamic invaders. So every sculpture in this temple has not been touched. It is being run by the Sringeri Mutt, and there is a very nice, very wonderful priest here known as Prashant Bharadwaj, who is a very good friend of mine. If you go here, do visit this temple if you go to this area. Now we come to Vijayanagara Empire and Vijayanagara architecture, which is like the last big school of innovation in terms of architecture. After that, the Marathas built temples, yes, but they built temples that are relatively simple and they were greatly influenced by Islamic architecture by that point in time. But Vijayanagara is the last truly Hindu school of architectural and sculptural innovation. So they started this tradition of building tall Raya Gopuras. That's why they are called Raya Gopuras, because their kings were known as Rayas. And they built these Gopuras in temples in Karnataka, in temples in Tamil Nadu, everywhere. Temple pillars often have engravings of charging horses or hippogriffs, that's a yali, and some of the yalis have women warriors in them. So this is the famous Garuda Ratha, which is actually simply an enclosure for Garuda, the Vahana of Vishnu, whose temple is the main temple, the Sri Vithala temple. Now those wheels that you see, those wheels can move actually, or they could move, but because our people are so stupid, they deface this. The ASI has fixed it with cement at the bottom, but till about 25-30 years ago, they could move. So this is how it looks. And those elephants, by the way, are not meant to be there. Earlier they had horses, which were much taller, but the horses' murtis were destroyed when Hampi was destroyed for about 6 months. So that's why they replaced it with elephants from somewhere else. But inside the Garuda Ratha, there was a Garuda Murti. Now that Murti is not there. Now the Murti is not there in the Vithala temple also. And you can see that even the main Rai Gopuram is kind of destroyed, because Hampi was destroyed for 6 continuous months. When the Vijayanagara Empire was destroyed by a combined Islamic force of all the South Shahis of Deccan, they killed the last king, Ramaraya, and they put his head on a stake and they put it out there to terrorize the people of Hampi. And then they attacked, ransacked, they burnt whatever they could burn, they destroyed whatever they could destroy, they looted whatever they could loot, they raped whomever they could rape, they took people slaves, whomever they could slave. 6 months. But still, whatever survives in Hampi is still pretty awe-inspiring. Okay, now I come to the end of my presentation. Again, we come to Sri Narasimha. Now I started with Sri Narasimha, I am ending with Sri Narasimha. This Sri Narasimha is in Hampi. It's a huge Narasimha. He was actually Lakshmi Narasimha, okay? He's not Yoga Narasimha, even though he has a yoga patta now. There was Devi sitting on his lap. You can see her broken hand coming out from under his arm. Can you see on the right side? A very slender, half broken hand. So that Lakshmi Murti is completely gone, destroyed by the Islamic Vandals. This Murti was built by Krishna Deva Raya It was built for him by sculptors from Odisha, that is why you see the Karanda Mukut and the face in very Odisha style. And this was built as a commemoration of his victory over the Kalinga kings. And it's a huge murti, you can see from the perspective. Now I am showing you this particular picture because I want you to know that this is how we practicing Hindus treat our heritage. This murti, it's not easy to get to. There is a huge compound outside and there is a gate which is always locked. Now this guy, he actually jumped over the gate, went inside. This is a royal murti. It was Krishna Devaraya did its prana pratishtha. It had full Shotoshopachar puja till Vijayanagara empire went down. But this gentleman is climbing on that murti with his shoes on and he is getting his picture clicked. This is the respect we have for our heritage, for our temples, for who we are essentially. We don't respect ourselves and we expect other people to respect us. So that is why I am leaving you with this image. Thank you.